served 9 years of active duty in the United States Army. He was a member of the Military Occupational Specialty 15 Romeo Apache attack helicopter repair while serving in the U.S. Army. He completed basic combat training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina in 2005. A few of his duty stations were Camp Eagle, Republic of Korea, Stork Barracks, Germany, and Fort Riley, Kansas, among others. He was deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Ending Freedom. Sergeant Long departed the U.S. Army in September of 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Sergeant Garrison Long a big round of applause. The Indian Reservation is so happy to have you with us today.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today about Veterans Day. Thank you to the Southern Choctaw High School Student Government Association and your sponsor, Ms. Miller, for organizing this event that honors Veterans Day. Thank you, Principal Newsom, for the invitation to speak this morning. Thank you to the band. It was excellent. To the faculty and staff, I also give my thanks for your cooperation in putting on this event. As a veteran of the United States Army, I'm very honored to speak to you this morning. We have 3 days set aside in the United States to honor our military. On Memorial Day, we honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. A lesser-known day, but is celebrated the third Saturday in May, is Armed Forces Day for those who are currently serving. And on Veterans Day, we honor all those who have previously served in the United States military. As was already stated, originally Veterans Day was known as Armistice Day to recognize the end of hostilities of World War I at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of the year 1918. It is for this reason that most activities on Veterans Day begin at 11:11 a.m. The U.S. Congress passed a concurrent resolution on June 4th, 1926, stating, whereas the 11th of November, 1918, marked the cessation of the most destructive, sanguinary, and far-reaching war in human annals, and the resumption by the people of the United States of peaceful relations with other nations, which we hope may never again be severed. And whereas it is fitting that the recurring anniversary of this date should be commemorated with thanksgiving and prayer and exercises designated to perpetuate peace through goodwill and mutual understanding between nations, and whereas the legislatures of 27 of our states have already declared November 11th to be a legal holiday, therefore be it resolved by the Senate, the House of Representatives concurring, that the President of the United States is requested to issue a proclamation calling upon the officials to display the flag of the United States on all government buildings on November 11th, and inviting the people of the United States to observe the day in schools and churches or other suitable places with appropriate ceremonies of friendly relations with all other peoples. Armistice Day was renamed Veterans Day in 1954 to honor American veterans of all wars, and each year since 1919 there has been a commemoration of Armistice Day or Veterans Day. Veterans Day helps us remember the sacrifices that have been made to keep the United States of America the land of the free and the home of the brave. President John F. Kennedy, he said, "My fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." This is a challenge that has rang true with over 41 million Americans who have served in the armed forces of the United States since 1775. Each generation of Americans has heard the call, which has required fathers, sons, mothers, daughters to leave their homes, their families, and their friends to defend our great nation. In 1775, it was a shot heard around the world that birthed our great United States of America, where some 217,000 Americans marched to war. They served through the cold of Valley Forge and fought against the most advanced military in the world at that time. Against overwhelming odds, they understood that failure was not an option. And in 1783, Great Britain and the United States of America signed the Treaty of Paris, and the United States became an independent nation. Not many years later, another 286,000 soldiers were called upon to defeat the British again in the War of 1812. Then known as the bloodiest war, the Civil War pitted father against son, brothers against brothers, and tested the mettle of this great country. And over 3 million Americans fought in the Civil War. While not as well known as some of our other wars, the Spanish-American War from 1898 to 1902 utilized some 306,000 soldiers. World War I, the Great War, also known as the War to End All Wars, the United States called upon 4,734,991 service members to defend our country. Some 53,000 of those died in battle on foreign soil, hoping and praying that their families, friends, and fellow Americans at home would never have to experience the horror and the terror of war on our own soil. 1941, a date which will live in infamy, drew the United States of America into World War II after an unprovoked attack on Pearl Harbor in the early morning hours of Sunday, December 7th, 1941, by Japanese fighter planes that killed 2,403 unsuspecting Americans and wounded 1,178 others. Some 16 U.S. ships and 188 U.S. aircraft were destroyed in the surprise attack. Surely Admiral Yamamoto was correct when he said, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." Yes, Admiral, your attack gave birth to the greatest generation. World War II saw over 16 million people don the uniform of the United States and take up arms in defense of our land. Of the 16 million service members that served in World War II, 1,711,000 veterans are still living. Those veterans deserve our eternal appreciation and gratitude for having the fortitude to defend our country at all costs. If you see a World War II veteran, chances are he'll have a hat on identifying him as a World War II veteran. Take the opportunity to shake his hand and thank him for his service. They're the last of a dying breed. After World War II, it wasn't too long before the armed forces of the United States were called to action again in Korea. And just under 6 million Americans served during the Korean War, and of those, there are still some 2 million Americans living, or 2 million veterans living. The Vietnam War, it was a different war. It was a war that bitterly divided our nation. And while some burned their draft cards and left the country to avoid going to Vietnam, another 8 million Americans served during that time, with over 3 million being deployed to Southeast Asia. While this was an unpopular war, those who went heard the call of their nation. They did not shirk their duty to their country. The veterans of the Vietnam War were mistreated by this country. They did the bidding of an ungrateful country, and this country turned its back on them in the 60s and 70s. No other group of veterans of the United States has been so denigrated, so disgraced, and so abused as the Vietnam War veterans. These men had to face situations that no human should ever have to face. These men did not ask to be in that position. Many of them were called up and they answered the call of their country. They had taken the oath to obey the orders that were given them, and they were simply trying to fulfill that oath they had taken. If you may be surprised if you meet a Vietnam veteran, how much a simple thank you means to that veteran, because many of them, when they came home, they weren't thanked for their service. Another 2 million service members were serving when Desert Shield, Desert Storm broke out, and it was substantially shorter than expected as the U.S. military quickly forced the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait within just mere days. Every generation has had an event that shaped its destiny. In 1775, it was a shot fired at Lexington. In 1812, it was the bombing of Fort McHenry. Remember, the Alamo was the cry of 1836. Pearl Harbor was the defining moment for the greatest generation. For my generation, it was probably September 11th, 2001, when some terrorists hijacked 4 American airliners, and 2 crashed into the World Trade Center towers, and another into the Pentagon, and the 4th plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after the passengers found out what had happened with the other 3 planes. They rushed the cockpit and forced it to crash instead of hitting what was believed to have been its target, the White House. I'll never forget that morning as I watched the devastation unfold, watching as the towers fell to the ground after this uncalled for attack. It was an attack that took nearly 3,000 American lives. And I well remember in the weeks that followed, President Bush standing at Ground Zero in New York City, surrounded by the firefighters who were searching for survivors, as he said, "I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." The global war on terror began, and U.S. service members have been called upon to fight on two different fronts, Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, we still have soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen in harm's way over there. 2.7 million Americans have been in Iraq and Afghanistan since 2001, and Iraq and Afghanistan were my battlefields. Excuse me. At 18 years old, I met a short little fella, I'm not even joking, he was only about this tall, in a green uniform at the office at Alabama Southern here in Gilbertown. And I walked by the office 3 or 4 times trying to figure out if this was an American soldier in a dress uniform or if it was a Boy Scout because he was so short. Turned out he was a recruiter for the United States Army, and 2 weeks later he had talked me into signing a contract to enlist in the United States Army. On May 17, 2005, I took my oath of enlistment at Maxwell Air Force Base up in Montgomery, and then was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training. If you allow me to use the words of my Army cadence to explain that experience. They took away my faded jeans, now I'm wearing Army greens. They put me in a barber's chair, I turned around, I had no hair. I used to drive a Cadillac, now I hump it on my back. I used to date a beauty queen, now I hug my M16. I used to drive a Chevrolet, now I'm walking on the way. Mama, mama, can't you see what the Army's done to me? Humorous, yet extremely true, except the Cadillac part. I had a Mustang. In 2007, I deployed to Iraq for a 15-month tour. It was all fun and games. I was aviation. We worked on helicopters, sent them outside the wire. They came back, landed in a safe area. I didn't have to see a lot of combat. It was all fun and games until one day I was on the back of a C-130 and we shut down at Baghdad, and they shut down all the engines and the APU, and in the silence we could hear a cadence being called. I wondered who in the world's calling cadence on the airfield in Iraq. Don't they have something better to do? And that question was soon answered when into our view marched a detail with a flag-draped coffin of someone who had paid the ultimate sacrifice. You see, war movies and books, they try to depict the combat death and the horror that goes into it, but they really don't have the proper effect. They're just movies and books. However, standing and rendering that final salute for a staff sergeant I had never met, I began to realize just how great a price many have had to pay for our freedom that we enjoy today. After a 15-month tour, I went back to Iraq a year later. 3 months into that, what was supposed to be a 12-month deployment, my company was split off from our battalion, and we were sent to Afghanistan, where we spent the remaining 9 months of our deployment there in Afghanistan. And then in 2013, I returned to Afghanistan for an additional 9 months. I've stood at attention more times than I care to remember as an NCO called the roll for a fallen soldier, and after the fallen soldier could not report, a 3-round volley, what's sometimes referred to as a 21-gun salute, and taps was played. I stood at attention for soldiers as they rendered their final salute at a battlefield cross, for sons who never hugged their mothers again, for fathers who never held their children again, and for husbands who never kissed their wives again. Those experiences do not make me hate being a soldier. No, they made me want to fight even harder for this great country for which they had paid the ultimate sacrifice. As the song says, all gave some, but some gave all. And in the providence of God, it did not fall my lot to pay the ultimate sacrifice. While I took off the uniform in 2014, I still have tremendous respect for those who are serving in our armed forces. I try to take each opportunity I'm afforded to remind people just how fortunate we are to live in this great country. Yes, this morning it's very important to remember the sacrifices that a few Americans have made to keep this nation free. Not all have paid the ultimate sacrifice. However, every person who has worn the uniform of the United States has had to hug a child, kiss a spouse, or leave a friend and walk through the door wondering if they would ever see their loved one again when Uncle Sam called their number. Every veteran stood at attention for roll call, for a 3-round volley, and taps, and realized just how expensive our freedom is. And every veteran who's returned home can remember the pride in their hearts as the doors opened. We marched back into a hangar to a crowd that couldn't wait for us to be dismissed. And every time there was always a huge American flag. And while we would be weary from the trip home and ready to see our loved ones, that flag served as a solemn reminder of how important our duty was. Our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our amendments lay out rights every American is afforded. However, those rights are only as good as the men and women who stand guard against the enemies, both foreign and domestic, who seek to destroy this country and our way of life. Charles Province said, "It is the soldier, not the minister, who has given us freedom of religion. It is the soldier, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the soldier, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the soldier, not the campus organizer, who has given us freedom to protest. It is the soldier, not the lawyer, who has given us the right to a fair trial. It is the soldier, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. It is the soldier who salutes the flag, who serves beneath the flag, and whose coffin is draped by the flag." Ladies and gentlemen, freedom is not free. It has been paid for in blood. This Veterans Day, I ask you to take time to really consider the cost of freedom. While our country may seem irreparably divided, every generation has faced difficult times. And in spite of the difficulties and differences, this is still the greatest nation on earth, still the land of the free and home of the brave, and it's still the only place that I want to be. This is still the United States of America. Thank you for this opportunity today. God bless, and God bless the United States of America.
That's great. You did it from the heart.
Now he's standing for a moment of silence. Thank you.